When did you realize your parents were total hypocrites? You're 13 now, which means you can buy your own school lunch, my mom said while signing a permission slip one day. We're not made of money, and you need to learn the value of hard work. That's when she also stopped buying me basic school supplies. Figure it out, she said when I asked for new notebooks and pens. Other kids your age have jobs, so maybe you should too. I felt confused and embarrassed asking teachers for extra supplies while my dad watched his expensive sports package that cost more per month than my entire school supply list. They'd just bought themselves a new 60-inch TV, but apparently couldn't afford a $5 pack of pencils. I started babysitting on weekends and walking dogs after school just to afford basic necessities like clothes and food. The humiliation of wearing jeans that were too short and shoes with holes burned in my chest, but I tried to act like everything was normal. Look at our little entrepreneur, Dad would joke when I came home exhausted from working. Maybe now you'll understand why we can't just hand you everything on a silver platter. I'd smile and nod while calculating in my head how to make $20 stretch for a week of lunches. By 14, they'd stopped buying me food entirely while ordering takeout for themselves 3 times a week. I'd come home starving to find them eating restaurant meals and empty cabinets. You could get a job at the grocery store and buy your own food like an adult, Mom would say, eating her Chinese takeout. The smell of their meals made my stomach ache, but I learned to stay in my room until they were done so I wouldn't have to watch them enjoy food I couldn't afford. I got better at managing money than my parents ever were because I had to make every dollar count. While they impulse bought gadgets and restaurant meals, I researched every purchase and found the best deals. I started a small business doing yard work and pet sitting that brought in decent money. The irony was that I had more financial discipline as a teenager than they did as adults. But they still mocked me for being poor when I wore thrift store clothes. It's embarrassing having a daughter who dresses like she's homeless, Mom said when I wore a secondhand dress to a family event. People are going to think we don't take care of you. I wanted to scream that they literally didn't take care of me and hadn't bought me clothes in 3 years. Dad would complain to his friends about how expensive kids were while I sat there knowing I'd been financially independent since middle school. I expanded my business and started making real money doing lawn care and pet services for half the neighborhood. My parents acted like my success was somehow thanks to their tough love approach. See what happens when you stop enabling kids and make them work for what they want, Dad would tell people. She's learned the value of a dollar unlike these spoiled brats whose parents just hand them everything. He said this while drinking $30 bottles of wine and playing golf at the country club. But then Dad got laid off from his job and suddenly their attitude toward money changed completely. We're going through a rough patch financially, Mom explained while asking if I could loan them money for groceries. Just until your father finds something new. I watched them panic about missing one mortgage payment while I'd been budgeting down to the penny for years. They had no savings despite making good money because they'd spent every dollar on wants instead of needs. You've got all that money just sitting in your account, Dad said when I refused to give them cash. Family helps family during hard times. I reminded him that family was supposed to help family when I was 13 and eating peanut butter for dinner every night. That was different because we were teaching you responsibility, Mom said like that made any sense. This is a real emergency. They kept asking for money every few days and getting angrier when I said no. You're being selfish and ungrateful after everything we've done for you, Dad said during one of his begging sessions. We could have kicked you out years ago, but we let you live here for free. I pointed out that letting your minor child live in your house was the legal minimum requirement for parents. Don't get smart with us when we're asking for help, Mom snapped back. I was counting my savings and planning to move out for college when both my parents cornered me in the kitchen with serious expressions. We've been talking, and we think it's time for you to start contributing to household expenses, Mom said while Dad nodded behind her. You're 15 now and you make good money, so it's only fair that you pay rent. Dad stepped closer with a contract in his hands. $500 a month plus utilities, or you can find somewhere else to live. I stare at the contract Dad's holding and my mind goes completely blank for a second. The paper has official-looking headers and lines for signatures. $500 a month plus utilities means I'd be paying nearly everything I earn, leaving almost nothing for food or emergencies. I did the math in my head fast. Between my lawn care business and the pet sitting, I bring in about $600 on a good month. Utilities in this house run at least another $150 during summer when they blast the air conditioning. That would leave me $50 for everything else. Food, clothes, school supplies, gas for the mower, everything. My parents are watching me like they expect me to just sign. Mom has her arms crossed and Dad's holding out a pen. I tell them I need time to think about it and retreat to my room before they can argue. Dad calls after me about being dramatic, but I close my door and lock it. My hands shake as I pull out my budget notebook and run the numbers, confirming what I already know. This would destroy everything I've built. I've been so careful with every dollar for 3 years. I have $2,000 saved up for emergencies and college application fees. If I paid them rent, that savings would be gone in 4 months, and I'd have nothing left over for the basics they stopped providing. I write out different scenarios, but they all end the same way. There's no version where this works without me going hungry or losing my business equipment. The notebook pages blur a little because my eyes are watering, but I'm not crying. I'm just mad and scared and trying to figure out what to do. That night, I lie awake researching on my phone whether parents can legally charge their minor child rent. The answers are confusing and vary by state, but most sources say parents have a duty to provide basic support until 18. Some forums have people saying their parents charged them rent as teenagers and it was fine. Others say it's neglect if the parents aren't providing food and necessities. I find a legal aid website that says parents have to give kids shelter, food, clothing, medical care, and education. Charging rent might be okay if they're still providing all that other stuff. But my parents haven't bought me food in over a year. They haven't bought me clothes since I was 12. I screenshot everything that seems relevant and save it in a folder on my phone. Around 2 in the morning, I finally fall asleep with my phone still in my hand. When my alarm goes off, I feel exhausted and my eyes hurt from reading tiny text for hours. The next morning, I tell my parents I'm not signing anything until I talk to someone at the school about it. We're in the kitchen and they're eating breakfast they bought for themselves. Dad's face turns red and he starts yelling about disrespect. He says I'm being ungrateful and they have every right to charge me rent. Mom joins in saying I'm acting like a spoiled brat who thinks she's too good to help her own family. I stay calm even though my heart is pounding. I tell them I just want to make sure I understand everything before I sign a legal contract. Dad slams his coffee mug on the counter and coffee splashes everywhere. He starts toward me, but I grab my backpack and leave for school early. I hear him yelling behind me as I walk down the driveway, but I don't look back. My hands are shaking again as I unlock my bike. The ride to the school usually takes 15 minutes, but I do it in 10 because I'm pedaling so hard. I spend my morning classes barely paying attention, trying to figure out who I can trust with this. My math teacher is explaining something about equations, but I'm just staring at my notebook. In English, we're supposed to be doing group work, but I tell my group I don't feel good and sit by myself. The school counselor, Mr. Gilmore, has always been nice when I've seen her in the halls, so during lunch I walk to her office. The main office secretary asks if I have an appointment. I tell her it's kind of an emergency, and she looks at me for a second before picking up the phone. 5 minutes later, Mr. Gilmore comes out and brings me into her office. She's probably in her 40s with gray hair, and she's wearing a cardigan even though it's warm. Her office has plants on the windowsill and motivational posters on the walls. Mrs. Gilmore listens to everything without interrupting, and when I finish, she looks genuinely concerned. I tell her about being 13 when they stopped buying lunch and supplies, about working since middle school to afford food and clothes, about them ordering takeout while I ate peanut butter, about the locked pantry and the contract Dad wants me to sign. She writes things down in a notebook and nods. When I'm done talking, she asks if I feel safe at home and whether my parents have ever been physically violent, which they haven't. She asks if they've ever hit me or threatened to hurt me. I tell her no, they've never done that. They just stopped taking care of me financially, and now they want me to pay them. Mrs. Gilmore's expression gets more serious and she taps her pen on the desk. She explains that while she's not a lawyer, charging rent to a minor raises serious questions about parental obligations. She says parents are supposed to provide basic necessities until their kids turn 18. If they're charging rent but not providing food or clothes, that could be considered neglect. She opens a drawer and pulls out some pamphlets about free legal aid services. She asks if I'd be comfortable with her making some calls to get me connected with someone who can give real legal advice. I tell her yes, please. I need help figuring this out. Mrs. Gilmore picks up her phone and steps outside for a minute. Through the window in her door, I can see her talking to someone and writing things down. When she comes back, she tells me she left a message with legal aid, and they should call back within a day or two. I agree and feel this huge weight lift just from telling someone the truth. For 3 years, I've been handling everything alone and pretending it was normal. Having an adult actually listen and take me seriously makes me want to cry, but I hold it together. Mrs. Gilmore also helps me apply for free lunch right there in her office, which I should have done years ago but was too embarrassed. She pulls up the form on her computer and helps me fill it out. She says it's nothing to be ashamed of and lots of students use the program. The application asks about household income and family size. Mrs. Gilmore helps me explain that my parents don't provide food money even though they live in the house. She submits it electronically and says I should be approved within a few days. When I leave her office, I feel lighter than I have in months. Someone knows. Someone is helping. I'm not completely alone anymore. 2 days later, I meet with Boyd from Legal Aid, who explains that parents must provide food, shelter, and basic necessities to minor children. Mrs. Gilmore set up the meeting and drove me to the Legal Aid office downtown after school. Boyd is younger than I expected, maybe in his 30s, with glasses and a tie. His office is small with boxes of files stacked everywhere. He has me sit down and pulls out a yellow notepad. He asks me to start from the beginning and tell him everything. I go through the whole story again and he takes notes the entire time. When I get to the part about the rent contract, he stops writing and looks up. Charging rent could be considered neglect if it prevents them from meeting those obligations, he says. He explains that parents have a legal duty to support their minor children. They can't just decide to stop providing necessities and charge rent instead. Boyd asks detailed questions about what my parents do provide versus what I pay for myself. When I list everything, food, clothes, school supplies, toiletries, his expression gets more serious. He writes it all down in 2 columns labeled provided and not provided. The not provided column is way longer. He asks about their income and whether they're actually struggling financially or just choosing not to spend money on me. I tell him about the sports package and the golf membership and the restaurant meals, about how they had plenty of money until Dad got laid off a few months ago. Boyd nods and keeps writing. He asks if I have any proof of what I'm telling him. I show him the screenshots from my phone of their takeout orders piled up in the trash while my cabinets were empty. Photos of the locked pantry. My budget notebook showing every dollar I've earned and spent for 2 years. Boyd looks through everything carefully and his jaw gets tight. He closes the notebook and leans back in his chair. Boyd tells me this documentation is solid evidence and exactly what we need if things get worse. He explains that he can write a formal letter to my parents outlining their legal duties as parents of a minor child. The letter will cite specific state laws about providing food, shelter, clothing, and basic necessities. It won't force them to change their behavior, but it might make them realize they can't just kick me out or demand all my money. Boyd says the letter will be professional and factual, not threatening, but it will make clear that their actions could be considered neglect. He asks if I want him to send it, and I nod immediately. Having something official from a lawyer feels like protection I've never had before. Boyd prints out some information sheets about my rights and tells me to keep documenting everything. He also gives me his direct phone number in case things escalate quickly. The meeting ends with him promising to mail the letter within 2 days. That evening at home, I'm heating up ramen in the microwave when both my parents walk into the kitchen. They have that look on their faces again, the serious one that means they're about to corner me. Dad crosses his arms and asks if I've thought about the rent contract. I take a breath and tell them I talked to a lawyer at Legal Aid. Mom's face goes pale and Dad's jaw tightens. I explain that I learned parents have to provide basic necessities whether their kid pays rent or not. Dad's face turns red and he starts yelling about how I'm threatening them and trying to make them look like bad parents. His voice gets louder with each word and I can feel my heart pounding, but I keep my expression calm. Mom starts crying and saying I'm so ungrateful after they've kept a roof over my head for 15 years. She's doing that thing where she cries to make me feel guilty, but I've seen it too many times to fall for it anymore. Dad steps closer and says I'm tearing this family apart over money. I stay calm and repeat exactly what Boyd told me. I'm willing to help with chores around the house and contribute in reasonable ways, but I won't sign a contract that takes all my earnings. My voice stays steady even though my hands are shaking. I tell them I need my money for food and school supplies since they stopped providing those things years ago. Dad opens his mouth to yell again, but I just turn and walk toward my room. They're both shouting behind me about disrespect and ingratitude, but I keep walking. I hear them storm off to their bedroom and slam the door so hard the whole house shakes. I lock my bedroom door and sit on my bed with my phone, texting Ms. Gilmore that the confrontation happened and I'm okay. She texts back immediately asking if I feel safe, and I tell her yes, just shaken up. The house stays silent for the rest of the night. The next week drags by with my parents barely speaking to me. Then one afternoon, I'm at the school when Boyd's letter arrives via certified mail. I know because when I get home that evening, the whole house feels different. The air is thick and tense, and my parents are sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of them. They don't look at me when I walk in. They don't say anything. I grab a snack from the limited supplies I can reach and go straight to my room. The silence is worse than yelling somehow. At dinner time, which I usually skip anyway, I hear them talking in low, angry voices, but I can't make out the words. This goes on for days with them treating me like I'm invisible, while also watching my every move. Mrs. Gilmore starts checking in with me every single day during lunch period. She pulls me into her office and we work on setting up a realistic schedule that balances school, work, and study time. My grades have been dropping because I'm too exhausted and stressed to focus on homework. She emails my teachers explaining that I'm dealing with family issues and helps me get extensions on missing assignments. We map out which classes need the most attention and when I can use free periods to catch up. She also connects me with the school's homework help program, where I can get tutoring for free. Mrs. Gilmore makes a spreadsheet of my entire week showing school hours, work shifts, study blocks, and even time for sleep. Seeing it all laid out makes me realize how much I've been trying to handle alone. She prints 2 copies, one for me and one she keeps in case we need to adjust things. My neighbor Eliana notices I'm bringing my lawn equipment to her garage more often than usual. One afternoon when I'm storing my mower and trimmer, she comes outside and asks if everything's okay at home. I give her a vague answer about my parents being stressed about money. Eliana looks at me for a long moment like she's deciding whether to push for more information. She doesn't push, but her expression tells me she understands more than I'm saying. She mentions that her garage has plenty of room if I want to keep all my equipment there permanently, instead of just sometimes. I thank her and accept the offer, grateful to have my expensive tools somewhere my parents can't mess with them. The next week, Eliana starts offering me more consistent work. She asks if I can mow her lawn every week instead of every other week, and if I can help with some garden maintenance too. She pays me upfront for the whole month, which helps me budget better and feel less panicked about money. While I'm working in her yard one Saturday, she brings out lemonade and casually mentions that her guest room is available if I ever need a place to stay. She says it in this light way like she's just making conversation, but her eyes are serious. I tell her thank you and that I really appreciate it. Having that option in the back of my mind makes me feel less trapped. At home, things get worse in sneaky ways. My parents install a lock on the pantry door and start counting every item in the fridge. They don't technically deny me food completely, but they make it clear what I'm allowed to touch. There are certain shelves in the fridge that are off limits, and the pantry is locked except when they're home to supervise. It's their way of controlling what I eat without breaking any obvious rules. I come home from work starving and find the pantry locked with a note saying they'll be home at 8. Meanwhile, I can smell their leftover Chinese food in the fridge, but I know I'm not allowed to touch it. I start documenting everything on my phone just like Boyd told me to. I take photos of the locked pantry with timestamps. I photograph the empty cabinets that I'm allowed to access, showing there's basically nothing there. When my parents order takeout, I take pictures of the bags and containers in the trash, then photos of my own dinner, which is usually peanut butter on bread or plain pasta. I screenshot our bank statements showing their restaurant charges. Every piece of evidence gets saved in a folder on my phone and backed up to a cloud account they can't access. Boyd said evidence matters if things escalate to court or child services. I never thought I'd be building a case against my own parents, but here I am taking photos in my own kitchen like I'm collecting proof of a crime. The next shift at the grocery store, Christian stops by my register during a slow period and leans against the counter. He watches me scan my usual lunch items, which are the cheapest things in the store, and then looks at me with this expression that isn't pity, but something closer to understanding. He mentions they have openings for more hours if I'm interested, and the pay would help with whatever I'm dealing with. I accept immediately because more stable income means less panic about making rent money or affording food. He tells me to stop by his office after my shift to fill out the paperwork, and I thank him while bagging my crackers and peanut butter. I fill out the forms that same afternoon, and Christian helps me get my work permit updated to allow more hours since I'm still 15. The new schedule starts the following week with 3 weekday evenings and full shifts on weekends, which means real money coming in regularly. But it also means less time for homework, and I'm already behind in 2 classes from all the stress at home. Miss Gilmore notices when I fall asleep during study hall and pulls me aside to ask what's going on. I explain about the increased work hours, and she doesn't lecture me about priorities or tell me to quit my job like some adults would. Instead, she helps me map out a study schedule that uses every free period and lunch break to catch up on assignments. She even talks to my teachers about extensions on some projects, so I'm not drowning in late work. 3 days later, I come home from an evening shift and find Dad waiting in the driveway with his arms crossed. He starts yelling before I even get out of my car about how he heard I'm getting free lunch at the school now. Someone from church must have seen my name on a list or something because he knows details I never told him. He says I'm making them look like deadbeats who can't even feed their own kid, and that I'm embarrassing the whole family with my poverty act. I try to walk past him toward the house, but he blocks my path and keeps going about how people at church are probably gossiping about what terrible parents they must be. His voice gets louder with each sentence, and I notice Eliana's porch light turn on across the street. She comes outside and just stands there on her porch watching us with her arms folded. Dad notices her standing there and his voice drops to an angry whisper, but I can see his jaw clenching and his fists tight at his sides. He tells me this conversation isn't over, and storms back inside, slamming the door hard enough that the windows rattle. The following weekend, I come home from mowing lawns to find my equipment sitting in the middle of the yard, completely soaked from the rainstorm that came through that morning. My parents swear they didn't know it was going to rain, and that they needed to get the car out of the garage for errands. But my mower won't start, and when I check the engine, I can see water damage that's going to cost more to fix than the mower is worth. I sit on the wet grass, staring at my ruined equipment and feeling like I might actually cry for the first time in months. This mower represented half my business, and replacing it will take weeks of saving. Eliana comes over an hour later and finds me still sitting there trying to figure out what to do. She looks at the destroyed mower and then at my parents' car parked in the driveway, and doesn't ask any questions about how this happened. She tells me to bring all my equipment to her garage right now, and that I can store everything there permanently, so this never happens again. I load up my trimmer and remaining tools and follow her across the street, feeling grateful that at least one adult in my life actually helps instead of sabotaging me. Back at work, Christian calls me into his office and offers me a permanent part-time position with set hours every week and a small raise. The stability means I can actually plan my budget instead of scrambling for irregular yard work money. I can count on a specific amount each paycheck and know exactly what I'll have for food and supplies. He also mentions that employee discounts apply to groceries, which will stretch my food money even further. That same week, I'm organizing my room when I notice Dad's been going through my things. My bank statements are out of order, and there are fingerprints on papers I keep in my desk drawer. I confront him about it, and he acts like it's his right to know what I'm doing with my money since I live in his house. Boyd's voice echoes in my head about keeping my finances separate, so I go online and open a prepaid debit card account that only I can access. I transfer most of my savings and set up direct deposit from work, so my parents can't track my income anymore. Boyd said documentation matters, and this is one more layer of protection. Sunday morning at church, someone apparently asks Dad directly about the rent situation, because he comes home absolutely furious about people gossiping about our private business. He slams things around the kitchen while Mom sits at the table looking embarrassed and won't make eye contact with anyone. She keeps saying they should never have mentioned anything to anyone, but Dad insists they didn't say a word, which means someone else is talking. I stay in my room and listen to them argue about who might have found out and how to handle the rumors now spreading through their social circle. Missy Gilmore schedules a mediation meeting at the school the following Wednesday with my parents, herself, and a social worker from the district. We all sit around a conference table, and the social worker explains that she's there to help us reach an agreement that works for everyone. My parents immediately launch into complaints about how disrespectful I've been and how I refuse to help the family during hard times. Dad brings up every perceived slight from the past month, while Mom nods along, adding her own examples. The social worker listens patiently and then redirects by asking what specific support my parents currently provide. The room gets quiet as they struggle to list actual things they pay for beyond the roof over my head. The social worker asks about food access, clothing, school supplies, and my parents give vague answers about teaching responsibility. She asks me directly what I purchase for myself, and I list everything while my parents sit there looking uncomfortable. After an hour of back and forth, we reach a temporary agreement where I won't pay rent for now, but I'll do more chores around the house to contribute. The social worker writes everything down in detail, including which chores, how often, and what my parents agree to provide in return. She prints copies for all of us and explains this is a working agreement we'll revisit in a month. My parents sign it looking annoyed but cooperative, and I take my copy knowing this piece of paper gives me something official to point to if they try changing the terms later. A few days later, I'm coming home from the school when I see Dad loading his golf clubs into someone's car in the driveway. He hands over the clubs and takes cash from the buyer, then watches the car drive away with this bitter look on his face. Inside, he counts the money at the kitchen table, and I hear him mutter something about paying the credit card company before they sue him. He doesn't ask me for money that whole week, which feels like progress, even though I can tell he's upset about losing his golf stuff. Mom surprises everyone by announcing she got hired at a retail store in the mall doing part-time work. She starts the following Monday and comes home that first day complaining about standing for 6 hours straight and dealing with rude customers. Every evening after her shifts, she talks about how tired she is and how her feet hurt. But it's weird seeing her actually work for the first time in years. The extra money helps because we start eating cheaper meals at home more often instead of them ordering takeout. Mom makes pasta with basic sauce, rice and beans, simple chicken dishes that don't cost much. It's not fancy, but it means I'm not hiding in my room eating peanut butter sandwiches while they enjoy restaurant food. I actually sit at the table with them during dinner, which hasn't happened in forever. One evening, Mom and I end up alone in the kitchen washing dishes together after Dad goes to watch TV. She's scrubbing a pot and mentions out of nowhere that her parents were really strict about money when she was growing up. She says they made her account for every dollar and never let her buy anything fun. It's not an apology, and she doesn't connect it to how she's treated me, but it's the closest she's ever come to explaining why she acts the way she does. I just nod and keep drying plates because I don't know what to say to that. Dad gets a call about an interview at a warehouse across town, and his whole mood changes. He actually seems hopeful for the first time in weeks, talking about the pay rate and benefits while looking at the company website. The tension in the house drops a little while we wait to hear back about whether he got to the next round. I use some of my savings to take my lawnmower to the repair shop because the engine's been acting weird. The guy fixes it, and I also buy better equipment that will last longer, a new trimmer and some professional grade tools. Eliana sees me unloading everything and offers to let me organize her garage so all my business supplies are in one place and easy to access. We spend a Saturday afternoon setting up shelves and hanging tools on the wall. She labels everything and even makes a schedule board where I can track which clients need service each week. At work, Christian starts teaching me about payroll and taxes during slow shifts when there aren't many customers. He shows me how to read my pay stub and explains withholding and deductions. He talks about budgeting strategies and how to plan for big expenses. He treats me like an actual adult employee instead of just some kid, which feels good after being treated like a burden at home for so long. Boyd calls to check in and asks how things are going with my parents. I tell him about the mediation agreement, and he says we should create a safety plan just in case they try to kick me out anyway. He has me write down Eliana's number, Ms. R. Gilmore's cell phone, and the address of a youth shelter downtown. He explains exactly what to do if I come home and the locks are changed or my stuff is gone. Knowing I have a plan makes me feel less scared about what might happen. My parents start cooking at home more regularly, and one day I notice the lock is gone from the pantry. Mom actually asks if I want anything special from the grocery store next time she goes, which is so weird I almost don't believe it's happening. She writes down that I like the wheat bread and a certain brand of peanut butter. It feels strange but good to have normal food access like a regular kid. Then I'm walking past the kitchen counter and see the cable bill sitting there with the payment amount circled. I pick it up and notice they've reactivated the sports package that Dad canceled a few weeks ago. All that progress with selling the golf clubs and cutting expenses, and they're already slipping back into their old spending patterns. The bill is almost $60 higher than it was, and they haven't even mentioned it to me. I put the paper back down and walk to my room feeling that familiar frustration building in my chest. They can't help themselves even when they're supposed to be learning to manage money better. 2 days later, I'm doing homework in my room when I hear raised voices from the kitchen. Dad's yelling about the bank sending an overdraft notice, and Mom's voice gets louder saying she didn't know the account was that low. I crack my door open and hear Dad accusing her of spending too much at Target while she fires back about his bar tab from last weekend. They go back and forth listing every purchase the other person made, neither one taking responsibility for their own spending. The argument lasts almost an hour before they both storm off to separate rooms, and I realize they learned absolutely nothing from the past few weeks. The next morning, Dad corners me before school and starts talking about how the household bills keep climbing. He says I need to start contributing something because the expenses are too high for just the two of them to handle. I pull out my phone and show him the photo I took of our written agreement from the mediation meeting, the one that says no rent until I'm 18. He gets red in the face, but I stay calm and tell him I'm not discussing it further because we already agreed on terms. He mutters something about ungrateful kids and walks away, but I can tell he's planning something else. That evening, Mom catches me in the hallway with this fake, cheerful expression and starts explaining a new system she thought of. She says instead of calling it rent, we could do chore credits where I earn points for household tasks, and those points count toward covering expenses. I stare at her for a second before saying that sounds exactly like rent with extra steps, and the answer is still no. Her smile drops and she huffs off to complain to Dad about how difficult I'm being. I go to my room and text Boyd about what just happened, and he responds within minutes saying I should start documenting everything in detail. I open a new note on my phone and begin writing down what food is currently in the cabinets, what time my parents ordered pizza for dinner, while I ate cereal, and I take photos of the bills they left on the counter showing their spending patterns. Boyd said if we need to escalate the situation, having solid evidence will protect me from their version of events. I make entries every day noting when they buy takeout, when the pantry has food I can access, and any comments they make about money or my supposed obligations. The documentation makes me feel less powerless because at least I'm building a record of what's actually happening versus what they claim. 3 days later, I'm at the school when Mr. Gilmore calls me to her office and shows me an email she's drafting to my parents. The message is professional and polite, but the warning is crystal clear, stating that if the agreed terms from our mediation are violated in any way, she'll be required to file a formal report with Child Welfare Services. She asks if I'm okay with her sending it, and I nod, yes, knowing my parents will be furious, but also knowing they need this boundary enforced by someone with authority. She hits send while I'm sitting there, and I watch the email disappear into the void, heading toward my parents' inbox where it will definitely cause an explosion. That Saturday, I'm working my shift at the grocery store, restocking shelves in the cereal aisle, when I see Dad walk through the front doors. My stomach drops because he's not here to shop based on the angry expression on his face and the way he's scanning the store looking for me. He spots me and walks straight over, his voice getting loud as he starts going off about how I'm making them look like terrible parents and turning everyone against them. Customers are stopping to stare, and I feel my face burning with embarrassment as he keeps ranting about ingratitude and disrespect. Christian appears from the back room and walks up calmly, positioning himself slightly between me and Dad. He tells my father in this firm but polite voice that he needs to leave the store, and Dad starts arguing that he has a right to talk to his own daughter. Christian doesn't back down, just repeats that he needs to leave now, or Christian will call the police for causing a disturbance. Dad looks like he wants to argue more, but something in Christian's expression makes him turn around and storm out, shoving the door open hard enough that it bangs against the wall. I'm shaking so badly I have to sit down on a step stool, and both Christian and Ariana come over to check on me. Christian says I did nothing wrong and they have my back completely, while Ariana pulls out the incident report form and starts writing down everything that happened with times and details. She tells me in this matter-of-fact way that if Dad comes back to the store, they won't hesitate to call the police for trespassing, and knowing they're serious about protecting me makes me feel safer than I have in months. After my shift, I go straight to Mr. Gilmore's house since she gave me her address for emergencies, and I tell her everything about the store incident. Her expression gets more concerned as I talk, and when I finish, she says she needs to file that report with Child Welfare now, because my dad showing up at my workplace to confront me crosses a serious line. The next day, a woman named Kathleen calls my cell phone and introduces herself as a caseworker, explaining she needs to schedule a home visit to assess the situation. My whole body feels cold and relieved at the same time, because I wanted help, but I'm also scared about what happens next and whether this will make everything worse. Kathleen schedules the visit for Thursday afternoon and says she'll need to speak with me privately, inspect the house, and review some financial information with my parents. When I tell my parents about the visit, they immediately go into panic mode. Mom starts deep cleaning every room like we're preparing for a military inspection, scrubbing baseboards and organizing closets that haven't been touched in years. Dad coaches her on what to say, practicing answers about how they provide everything I need, and I'm just being dramatic about normal family disagreements. I listen to them rehearse their version of events and decide I'm not playing along with any of it. When Kathleen arrives on Thursday, I'm just going to tell her the truth calmly, and let her draw her own conclusions based on facts instead of my parents' spin. Thursday comes and Kathleen shows up right on time, a woman in her 40s with a professional but kind demeanor carrying a tablet and folder. She talks to all three of us together first, asking basic questions about our household and daily routines. Then she asks to speak with me alone in my room. I show her my budget notebook, my documentation of food access and spending patterns, and the photos of bills on my phone. She doesn't look shocked or judgmental, just takes notes and asks clarifying questions about specific incidents and timelines. After talking to me for almost an hour, she inspects the house room by room, checking the pantry and fridge and taking photos of her own. Finally, she sits down with my parents in the living room, and I'm asked to join them. Kathleen speaks directly and clearly, telling my parents that charging rent to a minor child is inappropriate and potentially constitutes neglect of their legal duties. She explains they must ensure I have regular access to food and basic necessities, and she'll be monitoring the situation with follow-up visits. My parents nod and agree to everything she says, their faces showing a mix of embarrassment and resentment, but I can tell they understand she's not making suggestions. She's setting requirements they have to follow. Kathleen packs up her tablet and folder and walks to the door while my parents follow her with tight smiles on their faces. The second her car pulls away from the curb, the fake politeness drops completely. Mom goes straight to the pantry and removes the lock without saying a word, throwing it in the trash with more force than necessary. Dad pulls out his phone and starts scrolling through job listings while sitting at the kitchen table with his jaw clenched. Neither of them looks at me or acknowledges what just happened, but I can feel their anger filling up every corner of the house. Over the next few days, they buy groceries and leave them where I can reach them, but they arrange the items in a way that feels deliberate, like they want me to know they're only doing this because they have to. Mom makes a point of sighing loudly whenever she puts food in the fridge, and Dad mutters under his breath about government overreach and people not minding their own business. The rent contract disappears from the counter, but nobody mentions it, like pretending it never existed will somehow erase the whole situation. I keep my documentation updated anyway, taking photos of the unlocked pantry and the stocked fridge just in case things change again. 2 weeks after Kathleen's visit, Dad starts his warehouse job on the night shift loading trucks. He leaves for work at 10 p.m. and gets home around 7 a.m., sleeping most of the day before getting up to eat dinner and leave again. The exhaustion shows in everything he does, from the way he moves slower to how he falls asleep on the couch before his alarm goes off. The good part is that he's too tired to start arguments about money or anything else, which makes the evenings quieter than they've been in months. Mom seems relieved to have him out of the house at night, and she stops walking on eggshells waiting for the next fight to start. I come home from the school one afternoon to find Mom sitting at the kitchen table with worksheets spread out in front of her. She explains that her employer offers free financial literacy classes during lunch breaks, and she decided to attend one. The worksheets cover basic budgeting, tracking expenses, and setting savings goals, all things I figured out years ago by necessity. But seeing Mom actually engaged with the material and taking notes surprises me because she's never shown interest in managing money before. She asks me a few questions about how I track my business income and expenses, and for the first time we have a normal conversation about finances without anyone getting defensive or angry. It doesn't fix everything, but it feels like a small step towards something better. My daily routine settles into a predictable pattern over the next month. I wake up, go to the school, work my afternoon shift at the grocery store, come home to do homework, handle my assigned chores, and get to bed at a reasonable hour. The stability means I'm not constantly exhausted anymore, and my grades start climbing back up from where they'd dropped during all the stress. Teachers notice the improvement, and a few of them mention how glad they are to see me doing better. I'm not constantly calculating how to stretch $20 or worrying about whether there will be food when I get home. Life isn't perfect, and my parents still barely talk to me beyond basic household communication, but at least it's predictable and I can focus on the school and work without constant crisis management. One Saturday morning, Eliana texts me asking if I want to spend the weekend at her house just to relax and decompress. She says her husband is visiting his sister and she'd enjoy the company. Plus, she knows things have been tense at my house. I ask my parents and expect them to make a big deal out of it, but Dad just shrugs and says fine while Mom nods without looking up from her budgeting worksheet. I pack a bag and walk over to Eliana's house that afternoon, feeling lighter with each step away from my own front door. The weekend turns out to be exactly what I needed. Just 2 days of watching movies, helping Eliana with some gardening projects, and eating meals without any tension in the air. She doesn't pry about my home situation, but makes it clear I'm welcome at her house anytime I need a break. Sunday evening, I head back home feeling completely recharged and ready to handle whatever comes next. 3 weeks later, Kathleen shows up for her follow-up visit and sits down with all three of us in the living room. She reviews her notes from the first visit and asks specific questions about food access, my school performance, and household expenses. My parents answer politely and show her the unlocked pantry, the stocked fridge, and Mom's budget worksheets. Kathleen seems pleased with the improvements, but reminds everyone that the case stays open for continued monitoring, and she'll be checking in regularly over the next several months. After she leaves, my parents go back to their quiet resentment, but they don't change anything back, apparently understanding that Kathleen wasn't making suggestions. I meet with Missy Gilmore during lunch one day to talk about my plans for junior and senior year. She mentions a dual enrollment program that lets high school students take college classes at the community college, earning both high school and college credit at the same time. The program covers tuition, and there are scholarships available for books and transportation. Missy Gilmore helps me fill out the application right there in her office, and writes a strong recommendation letter highlighting my work ethic and academic improvement. I submit everything before the deadline and try not to get my hopes up too much, but the idea of getting a head start on college while still in high school feels like exactly the kind of opportunity I need. About a week after I submit the application, Mom approaches me in the kitchen and asks if I could loan them some money to cover an unexpected car repair. Dad stands behind her nodding, and they both have that familiar desperate look I remember from when Dad first lost his job. I tell them I can write up a formal loan agreement with the amount, interest rate, and repayment schedule, so we're all clear on the terms. I pull out my laptop and start typing up a simple contract while they watch. Their expressions shift from hopeful to uncomfortable, and Dad finally says, "Never mind, they'll figure something else out." They walk away, and I save the blank loan agreement template for next time, knowing that having everything in writing protects both them and me. The following weekend, I notice the big TV is gone from the living room. Mom explains that they sold it to help pay down their credit card debt, and Dad canceled the expensive sports package permanently. The living room looks empty without the huge screen, and I can tell they both hate having made these changes. But it's real progress toward getting their finances under control, even if they clearly resent every step. Dad complains about missing his games, and Mom mentions several times how small the old TV in their bedroom looks compared to what they had. I don't point out that these are the kinds of sacrifices I've been making since I was 13, because that would just start another fight. 2 months after submitting my application, I get an email saying I've been accepted into the dual enrollment program, with a full scholarship covering books and transportation costs. Starting next fall, I'll spend my mornings taking college classes at the community college, and my afternoons finishing high school requirements. The acceptance letter includes information about course selection and orientation dates. I print it out and show my parents, hoping they'll be proud, or at least acknowledge it as an achievement. Dad glances at it and says that's good, while Mom nods and mentions it will save them money on college later. Their reactions sting a little because this is a big deal, and I worked hard to make it happen, but I'm learning not to expect validation from them. A week later, we all sit down at the kitchen table with a printed document that lists everything in clear terms. No rent until I turn 18. My chores include taking out trash on Tuesdays and Thursdays, doing my own laundry, and helping with dinner dishes 3 nights a week. Food access means the pantry and fridge stay unlocked, and I can eat what's available without asking permission. My work income belongs to me, and I'm not expected to contribute to household bills. Mom reads through it twice, and Dad shifts in his chair looking uncomfortable, but he doesn't argue. We all sign at the bottom, and I take a picture with my phone before Mom drives me to the school to give the original to Ms. Gilmore for her files. Mrs. Gilmore looks it over and nods, filing it away in a folder with my name on it. She tells me to contact her immediately if anything changes, or if my parents try to modify the terms without agreement. The next Thursday, we have dinner together at the regular time with baked chicken and rice that Mom made using groceries from the store. Dad talks about a problem at the warehouse with a forklift that broke down. Mom mentions a difficult customer at her retail job who wanted to return something without a receipt. I tell them about a quiz I did well on in history class and a new client who wants weekly lawn service starting in spring. Nobody yells or brings up money or makes cutting remarks about my clothes or food. It's not warm, and we're not laughing or sharing deep thoughts, but we're sitting together eating a meal and talking about normal everyday things without tension crackling in the air. After dinner, I help load the dishwasher like the agreement says, and then go to my room to finish homework. Looking ahead, I feel something I haven't felt in years, which is cautious hope about my situation. I have adults watching out for me now with Miss Gilmore checking in weekly, and Kathleen doing monthly home visits. I have a clear path to college through the dual enrollment program that starts next fall. My parents are managing money better with someone holding them accountable, even if they still resent the oversight. I've learned I can stand up for myself when necessary, and that asking for help isn't the same as being weak or helpless. Things aren't perfect and probably never will be with my parents, but I'm building a future that doesn't depend on them staying consistent or suddenly becoming different people. That feels like the best outcome I could realistically achieve given where we started. That's it for today's story. Thanks for being here. It really means a lot that you'd spend a few minutes with me. I hope it brought a little warmth or peace to your day. Subscribe if you'd like to share more stories like this together.